What happens when a wealthy man discovers that the woman who's been cleaning his house for 9 years has been hiding a secret so profound it changes everything he thought he knew about love, success, and what truly matters in life? This is the story of Marcus Wellington, a self-made millionaire who believed he had it all figured out until the day he uncovered the truth about Grace, his quiet, unassuming housekeeper. What she'd been concealing for nearly a decade would not only shake him to his core, but make him question every assumption he'd ever made about the people around him. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of Black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. Marcus Wellington stood frozen in his home office doorway, staring at the woman he'd known for 9 years, the woman he thought he knew. Grace was seated at his mahogany desk, her back straight, fingers flying across his laptop keyboard with a precision that made his breath catch. This wasn't the careful, hesitant typing he'd expect from someone who cleaned houses for a living. This was the fluid, confident movement of someone who lived in the digital world. "Grace?" His voice came out rougher than intended. She spun around, her dark eyes wide with something that looked like panic. The laptop screen reflected in her glasses stock charts, financial reports, numbers that would make most people's heads spin. But Grace wasn't most people, was she? "Mr. Wellington." She stood quickly, smoothing down her simple gray dress. "I was just..." "What were you doing on my computer?" He stepped into the room, his Italian leather shoes silent on the Persian rug. 9 years. For 9 years, this woman had come to his house 3 times a week, cleaned his rooms, prepared his meals, and barely spoken beyond polite pleasantries. She'd been practically invisible, the way wealthy people preferred their help to be. Grace's hands trembled slightly as she closed the laptop. "I needed to check something." "Check what?" Marcus moved closer, catching a glimpse of papers scattered across his desk, documents covered in her handwriting. Calculations, projections, his own business documents, but annotated in margins with notes that showed a level of understanding that shouldn't have been possible. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Grace had always been beautiful in a quiet way. High cheekbones, intelligent eyes, skin like polished mahogany. But now she looked different. The subservient posture was gone, replaced by something that made her seem taller, more present. "How long have you been doing this?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace lifted her chin, and for the first time in 9 years, she looked him directly in the eye without immediately looking away. "Longer than you know." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Marcus wasn't ready to process. Everything he thought he knew about this woman, about his life, about the careful boundaries they'd maintained, was crumbling. But Grace wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, thick with papers. "There's something else you need to know, Mr. Wellington. Something about your business that you're not going to like." Marcus's hands shook as he opened the folder Grace had placed before him. Inside were copies of his own financial records, but they told a story he'd never seen before. Red ink circled discrepancies, arrows pointed to irregularities, and sticky notes marked patterns that painted a picture of systematic embezzlement. "Where did you get these?" His voice was hoarse. "I've been watching," Grace said simply. "For 2 years, I've been tracking the inconsistencies in your accounts. Someone's been stealing from you, Mr. Wellington. Someone close to you." Marcus sank into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. The numbers swam before his eyes, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, siphoned away through phantom vendors and inflated contracts. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" Grace's voice carried a bitter edge. "I'm just the maid, remember? The woman who empties your trash and changes your sheets." The accusation stung, because it was true. How many times had he walked past her without a second glance? How many conversations had he had about business while she was in the room, assuming she couldn't understand, couldn't contribute, couldn't possibly have insights that mattered? "I have a master's degree in finance from Harvard," Grace said quietly. "Graduated summa cum laude. I was a senior analyst at Morrison & Associates before..." She stopped, her jaw tightening. "Before what?" "Before I needed this job more than I needed my pride." She gathered the papers with efficient movements. "The theft is coming from inside your executive team. The pattern points to someone with access to your primary accounts and knowledge of your approval processes." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him. Not just because of the theft, but because of the woman standing before him. Grace had been in his house for 9 years, had seen him at his best and worst, had quietly absorbed the details of his life while he'd never bothered to learn even the basics of hers. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Grace paused in her organizing, her hands stilling on the papers. "Because despite everything, you're a good man, Marcus Wellington. You just forgot to notice the people around you." The use of his first name sent a shock through him. When had she ever called him Marcus? When had anyone looked at him the way she was looking at him now? Not as a wealthy employer or a business opportunity, but as a man who needed help. "There's more," Grace said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The person stealing from you, they know I've been investigating. And they're not gonna stop at just taking your money." The coffee mug shattered against the kitchen floor as Grace's phone buzzed with another message. Marcus watched her face go pale as she read the screen, her composed facade finally cracking. "What is it?" He knelt beside her, helping gather the ceramic pieces while she stared at her phone. "I have to go." Grace stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I can't. This was a mistake. I should never have gotten involved." "Grace, wait." Marcus caught her arm gently. "What did the message say?" She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back at his face. For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Then she pulled away. "You don't understand, Mr. Wellington. This isn't just about money anymore." Her voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "I have a daughter." The words hit him like a physical blow. A daughter. In 9 years, Grace had never mentioned a family. Never asked for time off for school events or sick days. How had he never known? "Where is she?" "Safe. For now." Grace's hands were shaking as she scrolled through her messages. "But they found out I've been copying files. They know I gave you the evidence." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "They threatened your daughter?" Grace's silence was answer enough. "We're calling the police," Marcus said, reaching for his phone. "No." Grace grabbed his wrist. "You don't understand. Your CFO, Richard Morrison, he's my ex-husband. He's Maya's father. If this goes public, if there's a scandal..." She took a shaky breath. "He'll use it to take her away from me. He's been looking for a reason for years." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Richard Morrison, his trusted CFO, the man who'd been by his side for 5 years. The man who'd been stealing from him while his ex-wife cleaned Marcus's house, protecting her secret, protecting her child. "Grace, look at me." Marcus waited until she met his eyes. "Why did you really take this job? Why my house?" "Because I needed to be close enough to watch him," she whispered. "Richard destroyed my career, made sure I couldn't get another job in finance. But I couldn't just let him win. I couldn't let him steal from you while I stood by and did nothing." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. A mixture of admiration and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. This woman had sacrificed her career, her pride, her future, all to protect her daughter and expose the truth about a man who'd wronged them both. "We're gonna stop him," Marcus said. "We?" Grace shook her head. "This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Marcus stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "Richard Morrison stole from my company and threatened an innocent child. That makes it very much my fight." But as he spoke, Marcus realized the truth was more complicated than that. Somewhere in the last hour, this had become personal in a way that had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with the remarkable woman standing in his kitchen. Grace's apartment was nothing like what Marcus had expected. Books lined every wall, financial journals mixed with children's novels, and advanced mathematics textbooks sat beside coloring books. A small desk in the corner held a laptop surrounded by papers covered in calculations that would challenge most CFOs. "Maya's at my sister's house," Grace explained, noticing his gaze on the children's things. "She doesn't know about any of this." Marcus picked up a framed photo from the bookshelf, a young girl with Grace's eyes and a gap-toothed smile, holding a science fair trophy. "She's beautiful." "How old?" 8. "She wants to be an astronaut." Grace's voice softened. Or a mathematician. Or a marine biologist. It changes every week. Smart like her mother. Grace shot him a surprised look. You really didn't know, did you? About my education, my background? Marcus set down the photo carefully. I never asked. I should have. But I never did. Richard made sure of that. Grace moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. When I threatened to expose his affair with his secretary, he destroyed me. Got me blacklisted from every major firm in the city. Made sure the only jobs I could get were ones where my education didn't matter. But you could have left the city, started over somewhere else. And lose Maya? Grace turned from the window. Richard's family has money, connections. If I'd taken her away, he would have used it against me in court. So I stayed, took whatever work I could find, and waited for my chance. Marcus was beginning to understand the depth of her sacrifice. The job at my house, you planned it. Richard mentioned you at Maya's birthday party 3 years ago. Said you were brilliant but naive about people. He realized if I could get close enough to your household, I might be able to gather evidence. Grace's voice dropped. I never planned on this taking so long. Or on you being so… She trailed off. So what? So decent. Richard always said you were just another rich man who didn't care about anyone but himself. But you're not like that. Grace met his eyes. You remember my coffee order. You ask about my weekend plans. You've never once made me feel less than human, even when I was just the invisible help. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Grace, don't apologize, she said quickly. I chose this life. I chose to be invisible because it was safer. But now Maya's in danger, and I can't be invisible anymore. As if summoned by her words, Grace's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it with trembling fingers. Grace Morrison? The voice was cold, professional. You have something that belongs to my client. Return the files, stop your investigation, and your daughter stays safe at her aunt's house. Continue down this path, and we'll be forced to take more direct action. The line went dead. Marcus watched Grace's face go ashen. They know where Maya is, she whispered. We end this now, Marcus said, his voice harder than steel. Tonight. The Wellington Industries building was dark, except for the executive floor, where Richard Morrison sat in his office, apparently working late. Marcus and Grace watched from the parking garage through the surveillance feed on Marcus's phone. He's destroying evidence, Grace said, pointing to the screen where Richard was feeding papers into a shredder. We need to get up there before he's finished. Marcus's security card got them through the lobby. But as they stepped into the elevator, Grace grabbed his arm. Marcus, what if this doesn't work? What if he's already moved the money offshore? What if… Hey, Marcus turned to face her fully. Look at me, Grace. She did, and he saw not just fear in her eyes, but something else. Trust. After everything she'd been through, after all the ways the world had let her down, she was trusting him with her daughter's life. We're going to get him, Marcus said, and then you're going to get your life back. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and they could hear the whir of the shredder from Richard's office. Grace pulled a small recording device from her purse. I need him to confess, she whispered. The evidence I have is strong, but a confession would seal it. They approached Richard's office, and Marcus knocked on the doorframe. Working late, Richard? Richard Morrison looked up from the shredder, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and finally, cold calculation. He was a tall man with graying hair and sharp features that Marcus had always thought projected competence. Now he could see the cruel intelligence Grace had described. Marcus. Richard's voice was carefully neutral. What brings you here so late? And with his gaze fixed on Grace, with undisguised contempt. With the help. Grace isn't the help, Richard. She's the woman who's been documenting your theft for the past 2 years. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. Phoenix Consulting, Apex Solutions, Morrison Holdings. Grace stepped forward, her voice steady despite the danger. Should I continue? All phantom companies you created to funnel money from Wellington Industries, over $1.2 million in the past 18 months alone. You always were too smart for your own good, Grace. Richard's voice dropped to a sneer. I warned you what would happen if you tried to interfere with my business. Is that a confession? Marcus asked, his phone recording everything. Richard laughed. You think this matters? You think anyone will believe her word against mine? She's a disgraced analyst who couldn't even keep her own husband satisfied. Ex-husband, Grace corrected. And the only disgrace was staying married to you as long as I did. Where's my daughter, Richard? Grace's voice cracked slightly. Where is Maya? Richard's smile was cold. Safe, for now. But that depends entirely on what happens next. Marcus stepped forward, but Grace put a hand on his arm. She was staring at Richard with something that looked almost like pity. You know what, Richard, I actually feel sorry for you, she said. You had everything, a brilliant wife, a beautiful daughter, a successful career, and you threw it all away because you couldn't stand the thought that I might be smarter than you. Shut up, Grace. Maya asks about you sometimes. She wonders why her father never calls, never visits. I've been protecting you, making excuses for you, because I didn't want her to know what kind of man you really are. Grace's voice was gaining strength. But I'm done protecting you. That's when Richard lunged for his desk drawer, and Marcus realized they were in more danger than he'd imagined. The gun in Richard's hand changed everything. Marcus stepped instinctively in front of Grace, but she moved around him, her eyes fixed on her ex-husband. You're gonna shoot us in your own office, Richard. In a building full of security cameras? Grace's voice was remarkably calm. That's your plan? My plan was for you to mind your own business, Richard snarled. But you never could do that, could you? Always had to be the smartest person in the room. I was the smartest person in the room, Grace said simply. That's why you couldn't handle being married to me. Marcus watched in amazement as Grace stepped closer to the man pointing a gun at them. Either she was incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. Where is Maya, Richard? She's with my mother, Richard said, and Marcus caught the slight hesitation. In Greenwich, safe and sound, as long as you cooperate. Grace tilted her head. Your mother? The woman who disowned you when you got caught embezzling from your father's firm in college? That mother? Richard's face flushed red. Shut up, Grace. Maya isn't with your mother, is she? Grace continued. She's still at my sister's house, because you don't actually have anyone willing to help you kidnap a child. You're bluffing. Marcus realized what Grace was doing. She was profiling her ex-husband, using her knowledge of his character against him. The recording device in her hand was still running. I said shut up. Richard's hand was shaking now. You want to know the truth, Marcus? Grace kept her eyes on Richard, but spoke to Marcus. Richard isn't just a thief. He's a coward. He couldn't handle being married to a woman who was better at his job than he was, so he sabotaged my career. He couldn't handle being a father to a daughter who might grow up to be smarter than him, so he abandoned her. And he can't handle being caught, so he's threatening violence. Grace, be careful, Marcus whispered. It's okay, she said. Richard's not gonna shoot anyone. Because deep down, he knows he's already lost. The FBI has the financial records. His bank accounts are frozen. And the only thing he has left is his pathetic attempt to intimidate the woman who exposed him. The FBI? Richard's voice cracked. Grace smiled. Did you really think I'd confront you without backup? They've been watching you for weeks, waiting for you to make a move. Those phone calls threatening Maya? They recorded every one. As if on cue, the elevator dinged, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Richard's hand dropped to his side, the fight going out of him like air from a punctured balloon. It's over, Richard, Grace said softly. Finally, it's over. But as the FBI agents entered the office, Marcus realized that for him and Grace, something was just beginning. 3 months later, Marcus found Grace in the same place he'd first discovered her secret, his home office. But this time, she wasn't hiding. She sat across from his desk in the client chair, wearing a sharp business suit instead of her cleaning uniform, her hair pulled back in a professional bun that somehow made her look both more formidable and more beautiful. The Morrison Holdings account has been fully recovered, she was saying, sliding a folder across the desk. Your losses are completely recouped with interest. The FBI was very thorough. Marcus nodded, but he wasn't really listening to the financial report. He was watching the way Grace's eyes lit up when she talked about complex transactions, the way her hands moved as she explained the intricacies of the case they'd built against Richard. "And Maya?" he asked. Grace's professional demeanor softened. "She's doing well. The counseling is helping her process everything. She's actually excited about the move." "The move?" "The job offer in Chicago. The one you recommended me for." Grace's voice was carefully neutral. "Wellington Industries' competitor is willing to pay me twice what I made before Richard destroyed my career. It's a fresh start for both of us." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. That's wonderful. You deserve it." "Do I?" Grace met his eyes. "After what I did? Lying to you for 9 years, using my position in your house to investigate your business? You saved my company," Marcus said. "You exposed a criminal. You protected your daughter. I'd say you deserve everything good that comes your way." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "Maya asked me something yesterday. She wanted to know if you were coming to Chicago with us." Marcus's heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be." Grace stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I should go. Maya's waiting for me." "Grace." Marcus stood as well, coming around the desk. "What if you didn't take the job in Chicago? What if I stayed here and did what? Clean your house? We can't go back to the way things were, Marcus. I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to move forward. With me." Grace stared at him. "Marcus, you're my former employer. I was your maid. People will talk. Let them talk." Marcus stepped closer. "You're the most brilliant woman I've ever met. You're brave, you're beautiful, and you make me want to be a better man. I don't care what people think." "And Maya?" "Maya is amazing. She's part of you, which means she's part of what I love about you." Marcus reached for Grace's hands. "I know this is complicated. I know we have history to work through. But I also know that I can't imagine my life without you in it." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I told myself I could walk away from this. From you. That it was just proximity, just gratitude for helping us. And now I realize I've been in love with you for years. Even when I was just the invisible woman emptying your trash. I was falling for the man who said please and thank you, who asked about my weekend, who treated me like I mattered even when he didn't know who I really was." Marcus kissed her then, right there in his office, where this had all started. When they broke apart, Grace was smiling through her tears. "So," she said, "I suppose I need to call Chicago and turn down that job offer." "Actually," Marcus said, grinning, "I have a better offer. Wellington Industries is in need of a new CFO. Someone brilliant, trustworthy, and completely incorruptible. Know anyone who might be interested?" Grace laughed, the sound filling the office with joy. "I might know someone, but she has a few conditions." "Name them." "No more secrets. No more hiding. And Maya gets to help interview any future employees, because she has excellent instincts about people." "Done," Marcus said. "Anything else?" Grace looked around the office where she'd spent so many years cleaning, where she'd risked everything to expose the truth, where she'd finally found love. "Just one more thing," she said. "I'm keeping my maiden name. Grace Coleman has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Marcus smiled, pulling her close again. "Grace Coleman, CFO of Wellington Industries. I like it." Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And for the first time in 9 years, Grace and Marcus were both exactly where they belonged together, with no more secrets between them, ready to build a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The woman who had hidden her brilliance behind a maid's uniform had finally stepped into the light, and the man who had been blind to the treasure in his own house had finally learned to see. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary places, with the most invisible people, who turn out to be extraordinary after all.